Good evening from this very blustery day in Norfolk. My name is Gabrielle Motola. I'm going to talk to you today about a workshop that I've developed over the last few years based on my own street portrait photography practice. Um, just quickly about myself, I studied film, psychology, and photography, so I have a background, but I've taken level 1 and 2 counseling in the last few years, and I did the PG cert at RGU last year in therapeutic photography. I wrote a book called An Equal Difference, which was about Iceland's mindset around the financial crash and also as it pertains to gender equality, because I was curious as to why they kept turning up in the WEF global gender gap report. That's a big mouthful. Number one in equality in the world. What did that mean? So I use photography as a way to go and talk to people there. So portraiture has always been a really big part of my work as a photographer. So today's talk, I'll touch on my practice, when it began, what it is, how I turned it into a workshop, mostly what that workshop is, what it contains, and the therapeutic approach that I use, multidisciplinary. And then I'm just going to give you some examples of participants, their work, and their feedback about the workshop. So my practice began in 2019 as a way to overcome fear and anxiety around making portraits of people. I'm somebody who has struggled with depression and anxiety for most of my adult life. And so it was very useful for me to be able to frame this in the context of a habit where I one day decided I was going to make a portrait of a stranger every day, or I was going to ask at least, and if I made the portrait, great. And if they said no, that wasn't about me. I learned that over time. I didn't used to know that. I used to take rejection very personally. And it stopped me from doing a lot of the things I wanted to do because I just wouldn't even try. I was too afraid to get rejected. So when I began, I didn't quite have a code of ethics yet, but I did have clear intentions as to why I was making portraits of people. A lot of what I work with when I'm doing my practice is watching my mind try and anticipate what I think is going to happen or what I think people are going to say. I'm not a mind reader. So rather than engaging with those stories I'm telling myself, I watch them and I let them go, and I go and I find out what's actually going to happen, which is always surprising and usually much more interesting. I feel fear when I do this, still to this day, when I ask for somebody's portrait. But I've learned how to cope with that fear. I've learned to notice what my body is feeling and to breathe and relax myself by breathing and being present and grounded in the moments and practicing mindfulness. And so I ask and I allow whatever's going to happen to happen. I know I have no control over the other person, over what's going to happen. I can only ask and see. If I make a picture, great. If I get a rejection, that's great too, because that gives me the opportunity to work with that. So I've learned that rejection isn't personal. It's always about the other person. It's not about me. And it's a hot potato. I try to treat it like that. Drop it, let it go. Don't ruminate on it. And it used to stay with me a lot longer than it does now. Now, if I get a rejection, I just sort of move past it quite quickly, and I've forgotten it by the time I make the next portrait usually. And the process for me is about observing myself and reflecting and using positive self-talk and positive reinforcement to help myself. So rather than being critical about what I didn't do right, I try to look at what I did do right and give myself credit for that, and then think about what I could do better. And I try to cultivate a much kinder relationship with myself, and it actually has happened. I have a much better relationship with myself. I know when I'm being hard on myself. I'm much more aware of it, and I work to let that go. And to dig underneath what that's about for myself. It's usually about anxiety and fear. So creating a habit out of this practice was the best thing I could have done, because just doing it every day means I don't have to think about it. So I did that for about a year. And I don't make pictures of people every single day now, but I do make pictures of people a lot still. So the workshop itself is photography forward. We're practicing photography, but it's got a therapeutic benefit, because in order to work on your photography, you need to work on yourself, your mind. So you have your camera and your lens, but really what you're making pictures with is your mind, you. What you see and what the camera sees have to merge, because you have to tell the camera what you are paying attention to, because the camera doesn't know unless you point it. So if there's something in the frame you didn't want, the camera doesn't know that. If you're not aware of it, it will be in the frame. If you are, you move the camera. So photography is a wonderful tool for developing awareness, not only with photographs, but inside as well. So the workshop's a day. I've done a lot of iterations of this workshop over the last two years, and I've taken feedback from participants. At the end of every course, I send out a feedback form, and it's now a full day. We always open the session in the morning with theory, usually over coffee. I will have emailed them ahead of time my code of ethics to encourage them to start thinking about their intentions and what is ethical to them about what they're going to do, what their boundaries are. So once we finish the session in the morning, which is about us getting to know each other, talking about our relationship photography, what we'd like to get out of the day, we always talk about nerves, which most people have, including myself. I go out and demonstrate, so they follow me and I make pictures of people and they listen to and watch my interaction. And when they're ready, they go and ask. So I can't do that part for them. I just ask that everybody in the group commit to asking one person. And whether they say yes or no isn't in their control. They decide if they want to ask another person. And we just go through the day and practice. They ask, they make a picture, or they don't. And we always work on the feedback with them. What is going on for them? How do they feel? How is that? If they made a picture, I work photographically with how is the picture? What could they do? And I give them notes. I also encourage them to look at what they did well. So if they asked and they didn't get a picture, great, they asked. If they asked and they got a picture they didn't like, they asked and they made a picture. And we just practice like that, and we reflect and feedback. We have a break in the middle of the day for lunch, which is just about relaxing. And then we go back out and we continue the day as we did the first part. And then at the end, we have a closing session, usually at a pub over a drink. We wrap things up. We talk about the future goals. Maybe they'd like to commit to making a portrait a day for a week, if they can, or a month, or a year. And they're all on WhatsApp. So they have their own group, but then that group has access to all of the other groups that I've taught. So there's a central group. So there's ongoing support through that, and people can share their work. And again, it's about photography. We're really here to learn how to make pictures, but in order to do that, we have to work on ourselves. We have to work on our self-talk, our fear, and we do it gradually, which is why I call it exposure therapy. I create a safe space, a holding space, and they can explore within that. And we work on reframing rejection, and we work on our mindfulness and our listening to our intuition. And I also go over street photography law, so what's legal in whichever country I'm teaching in when it comes to public photography, and then ethics, and we talk about that. It's a very process-focused workshop, so it's not about making great pictures, even though it is a photography workshop. That comes in time. Really, people come to me to get over their fear of asking strangers to make portraits of them. And that is a real thrill to be able to just ask. So we're really focusing on that. And we are really working with our inner monologue and our awareness, not only of our photographs, but of ourselves. And we are aiming to boost confidence. And that happens by wanting to ask somebody and asking somebody. It really doesn't matter if they say yes or no. The fact that you asked is incredibly, it's incredibly positive, and it creates self-efficacy after, repeating it by engaging over and over with this and asking, regardless of what people say. It shows you that you can do this. And so at the end of the day, I always count up how many rejections each person had. I tell them at the beginning of the workshop, the person with the most rejections wins, not the person with the best pictures, because that's really where the work is done. So some of the therapeutic aspects of the workshop: mindfulness, because we're outside walking around, we're doing a physical activity, we're present, we're moving, we're observing. Photography gives you a wonderful opportunity to externalize your emotions, your inner states, to work with your inner states and your emotions when it comes to other people, relationships. Empowerment, the camera, as we know, is a wonderfully empowering tool. And then the great thing about the group is that it's normalization. So people really understand that we share common struggles and that we are not alone in those struggles. And that helps us relax and feel better about ourselves and let go of some of the judgment that we have about ourselves. We keep repeating the cycle of, asking and dealing and reflecting. And so, each time we have the fear, we learn to recover from it. So we are learning to emotionally regulate over time, and reframe our thoughts and feelings about what we're doing, and develop a much more compassionate relationship, a kinder relationship with ourselves. Because ultimately, that is going to help us make better pictures. If being really hard on ourselves was going to work, it would have worked by now. So here's some metrics, just some scale of 1 to 10s of confidence, in red before the workshop, and in green after the workshop, about how people felt about making portraits of strangers, asking for the portraits. And then the overall workshop experience is generally very positive. And so this is Katie. She was a participant in the Bristol workshop that I taught. And she uses photography to cope with anxiety in many different ways, but her portraiture practice specifically gave rise to a really large mindset shift, which was very heartening to hear and to see in the workshop. So these are some of the pictures she made at the workshop. And it was just, it's also like a brilliant day out. It's a lot of fun. And so it's one of the really positive aspects of it, is it's social. And there's a sense of community. And this is Jesse. He's from the States, and he did the workshop when I came to New York. And he is a veteran of the Iraq War, and he's done a lot of therapy and a lot of work on himself for the PTSD that he suffers. And he says that his street portraiture practice was one of the big sort of milestones and turning points in his ability to sort of link everything together. And he's found making portraits of strangers hugely therapeutic, and helping him develop a better relationship with himself, with others, and his ability to really feel good and listen to others. So it's been really, really beautiful to be able to have seen that with Jesse, but also to speak to him about that as we have stayed in contact. I'm still in contact with many of the people who've taken the workshop. So just to briefly touch on the theoretical foundations, holding environment I mentioned, positive psychology, cognitive behavioral, reframing, and, phenomenologically, just engaging directly with the world through photography for growth and knowledge about self. The camera is a mirror. It's a wonderful tool. You project onto the subject yourself. And so a photograph is sort of I look at it as a representation of a relationship in time. And for me, the relationship's very important. And the photograph is a beautiful souvenir of that relationship. So if you want to work on your photography, work on yourself. This is really the message for photographers. If you want to improve your photography, work on yourself, work on your mind. And so for the future, I think mental health professionals would be very interesting to work with in co-developing workshops, in maybe taking workshops and picking up some of the tools for deeper client engagement. It'd be really interesting to work with psychotherapists. I'm not a licensed trained psychotherapist, nor do I intend to be, but to work perhaps in a retreat setting for deeper work. And then the development of future workshops. I've got a few iterations in development. So please get in touch if you want to talk about this, if you're interested in the workshop or in talking about collaborating and just exploring. I'd be really happy to hear from you. Thank you very much for your time, and it's been a pleasure to be part of this.